Hello, everyone. Thank you very much for joining us on Learn Liberty. This live is going to be about taxes and inflation, and we'll be joined by Martha Bueno. She is the County Commissioner for Miami District 8, and she will be also the MC for our LibertyCon International that will be held in October 14 and 15 in Miami. Hello, Martha.
Sorry, I muted myself. I'm sorry. I just wanted to make a quick correction. I am not a commissioner. I am a community council member. Just wanted to clear that up because I was running for commissioner,
Sure.
but I did not get the seat.
Sorry, not American here, so I mix them up all the time. I'm sorry. I
It's
apologize.
okay.
And we'll be joined by Brad Polumbo. He is a libertarian conservative journalist, and he is also the co-founder of Base Politics. He's been cited on all of these places. Thank you very much, Brad, for joining us as well.
Hey, good to be with you guys.
So I wanted to let you know that we're going to see Martha at our LibertyCon International, like I said, in October 14 and 15. And if you want to join us with 50% off, you can use Learn Liberty code for 50% off for your tickets. Brad was also going to be part of it, but unfortunately he had other plans just way earlier for that. But you could also see Brad there as well. I'm sorry about that, but it'll be great. You can also watch our stream, Brad, if you want. I'm sure. So today we're going to discuss about the current tax system in the US. And Martha, she has a very specific experience with Miami tax code, and she was also fighting for that. And Brad has been writing about it for all along. So I think we're going to have a lot of things to talk about. So, but I would like you to introduce yourselves a bit better than I did first.
Go sure. Ahead, Brad, you want to start first?
No, Martha, you go ahead.
Okay, so I just recently got off a run for Miami-Dade County Commissioner. As I mentioned, I am a community council member. I've been doing that for 4 years. And this has given me the unique opportunity to pay attention to what is happening with Miami-Dade, with its taxes, with, as you mentioned, the tax code. And so that is why I am here. And of course, as you mentioned, I will be the MC of LibertyCon. So everybody, please buy your tickets now. Make sure you have your tickets ready to go. It's going to be a good time.
Great. Go ahead, Brad. You have also a lot to talk about, I'm sure.
Yeah, so I am a journalist. I cover economics from a libertarian leaning perspective. I actually studied economics at the University of Massachusetts Amherst, which folks don't know. It happens to be the only openly avowed Marxist economics department in the continental United States. But I was actually really put off by it. I was like, this is not my cup of tea. And so I went and really became interested in free market economics, Milton Friedman, Thomas Sowell, Ludwig von Mises. And I've been writing about these issues for years now. And the issue of taxation is one that we never seem to get enough coverage of because they're constantly working to raise our taxes in new and novel ways. And as I'm sure we'll discuss, inflation is in and of itself, it's a form of taxation. And that's the one we've been dealing with the most. So I've been all over covering that.
Thank you very much. So since I made the mistake first, I'll go and ask Martha, what does a county commissioner do? And what did you want to do, especially considering changing the life situation of life for people there? You muted yourself.
I keep doing it. I'm sorry. This is like, I'm trying here. So what does a county commissioner do? Miami-Dade County is the 7th largest county in the United States. And its budget, actually, we just increased it by $1 billion. Its budget right now is $10.3 billion with a B. So what do county commissioners do? Well, they manage that budget. They decide which projects get funded, which ones don't, where that money goes, etc. And my goal, the reason I was running was because I saw the waste, saw the inefficiencies, and I wanted to contribute, add my little piece to that. Unfortunately, I didn't get the seat, but that's not the only way that we can make changes. I expect to continue to follow what's going on and holding people accountable because it is a lot of money, and that money is coming from our pockets. Unlike the federal government, the state, the county can't print their own money. So if we don't have the money, we will be insolvent. So that is a big reason why we should all be paying attention to what happens in our local governments.
And I did that myself as well.
No, I'm not.
Yeah, you're not the only one, of course. I wanted to make you feel welcomed. So, Brad, you've been trying to inform people about taxes forever. And also, like you mentioned, you were, let's say, a bit like indoctrinated in the Marxist economics. So, what are your main takeaways from the US tax system? What are the potholes there?
Yeah, I think there's a couple things that people just aren't aware of that they really should about our tax system. One, I mean, on the left today, on the progressive movement, you constantly hear mantras about tax the rich, but we actually already do that, right? We actually already have a very progressive federal tax system where higher earning people pay most federal taxes. And the thing that separates the US from somewhere like, the Nordic countries is that their tax systems actually charge basically everybody 40, 50, 55, 60%. Right? These are across the board exorbitant taxes because you can't actually pay for everything in the sun just by taxing the rich. In fact, even PolitiFact has confirmed this. You could confiscate every dollar owned by U.S. billionaires, and you wouldn't even be able to fund the federal government for a year before you ran out of money. So when you ask them how we're going to pay for things, and they just say tax the rich, it's really a smokescreen because we're already taxing the rich a lot. You could maybe do a little more, but ultimately they're going to be taxing all of us because the second aspect of economics that people don't fully realize, and I think can be really harmful, can lead you to a lot of economic misconceptions, is this idea between the seen and the unseen, right? You say we're increasing corporate taxes, and those taxes may be formally levied on corporations, but if you look at the economic research, if you look at economic theory, we know that actually corporate taxes are borne in large part by workers through lower wages. So who they assign a tax to isn't always who pays the price for it. This is true with lots of taxes on the rich. And all sorts of, government spending even leads to inflation when you just print the money. And then they say, oh, we're not raising taxes. We're just paying for it by printing money. Yeah, well, I know that sounds great in your little modern monetary theory circles, but that ends up self-taxing us all through crushing inflation. And we're living through that now. So I guess just overall, the thing I try to stress on people is when it comes to the tax system, you've got to look beyond the rhetoric and actually figure out who's really paying for what here.
Yeah, it's very valid. And that was one of the things I wanted to talk about. What do you think about, well, since you Brett mentioned that, what do you think about, Martha, people talking about tax the rich, especially if you remember the AOC dress like 2 years ago or something?
I love that dress. Yeah, I especially love, I think it was Kennedy at an event recently. She wore a dress that was the same about tax the rich. You know what? I think it's like Brad said, it's a smokescreen. It's what you tell people that just sounds right. I mean, it's easy to sell to people. And this is, I guess, maybe more of my upbringing, more of the part of being a Cuban who is also Venezuelan. I've seen how they can sell this fear, this hatred of one group of people, and that makes you want to go against them. The reality is, as Brad just said, you can tax everybody all, as much as possible, and that still wouldn't be enough. But what an easy way to sell something. You don't have this thing because that other person refuses to pay for it. And so there's no way that person can defend themselves because you're talking about a huge group. And that builds this idea that, oh, we just need to take from that guy so I can have this thing. It's definitely a socialist tactic that we've been using. It's a way to make us all angry and want to go after other people's things. And you know what? It's never worked. It's never going to work. And at some point, as Margaret Thatcher said, you run out of other people's money.
Very much agreed. What do you think about, especially in Miami, the Cuban and Venezuelan people feel about taxing the rich, or generally about taxes?
Well, I don't know if I can speak for all of them, but there's actually a lot of Venezuelans and Cubans that are on the left and are okay with taxing. I think the overall problem that we have is this idea that somehow government's going to come in and solve the problem, and we haven't been able to get people out of that mindset. That's really the problem of this whole situation, is that notion that somehow government's just going to make life great for you. Somehow, if there's only we pick that one right leader, if only we get the one right person to charge the right amount and to give it to the right people, everything's going to be great. And you know what? There's just never going to be that thing. So I think that's the problem. We come to this country looking for better, to be able to improve our situations, and then we ask that the government continue to give us things, and it's just not the way it works, unfortunately.
Talking about fairy tales, Brad, what do you think about modern monetary theory?
Well, I think it sounds lovely, right? This idea that you can just have whatever you want and the government doesn't have to balance its budget or pay for things because they can just print money. Modern monetary theory is a beautiful and tempting lie, right? It tells you that scarcity doesn't exist, even though that's the most basic thing we know about economics. There's simply not enough stuff to satisfy everybody's wants and needs. So I think that when it comes to MMT, right, we're living through an experiment in it. When you just print money like they did in 2020 and 2021 with the pandemic, what you end up with is actually just inflation. Shocker, right? More goods, more dollars chasing the same amount or even fewer goods, higher prices. This is actually basic economics, but they thought with these newfangled theories that somehow the old rules don't apply, which it never made sense, the very principle of it, because the government's not Santa Claus, like Ludwig von Mises said, right? They can't create resources, which is what money is ultimately supposed to correspond to. So when they just create more money, we still have the same amount of resources. They can't actually take actual resources in the real world and conjure them up out of thin air. So yes, they can conjure dollars, unfortunately, because we've abandoned things like the gold standard. But they can't actually change the reality of the economy that we live in. And when they try, it leads to inflation. And if they go really far and they keep doubling down, it leads to the kind of hyperinflation that we've seen ruin entire nations.
I can confirm that hyperinflation. I did live in Venezuela when the first fall of the Bolivar, and it happens very quickly. You go to the store today and something is worth a Bolivar, and tomorrow it's worth 5, and the next day it's worth 10. And it's, you know, it's what happens when these governments go out of the way. So
Yeah. So Martha, you had this idea about solving a very specific situation in your district. It was related to both taxes and traffic. Can you tell us a bit about that? I think there's an interesting point you had there. No?
I'm not sure which point we were discussing. I mean, I had a lot of ideas. I just don't know which one specifically.
Oh yeah, sure. So
both together sounds really good. I think you should tell me what that was.
Sure. So what was your idea about the tax system in Miami? What would you change there? Since it's also you're living there now.
Sure. Well, I don't think it was about the tax system itself. It's just an idea that the people that make, the people that pay the taxes are better off having that money in their pocket rather than giving it to the county to have the county spend it however they want, which is the system that we have everywhere. So really, it wasn't necessarily an idea other than just lowering the tax rate so that people keep more money of the money that they have in their own pockets rather than in government's pockets, where we see the amounts of waste and just general inability to produce the results that we all expect the government to produce.
Exactly. So Brad, what would be your top 3 policy suggestions about the US tax system? If I can pick your brains about it.
Oh, wow, there's so much. Where to begin? I agree with Martha's general premise, right? Because it reminds me of something Milton Friedman talked about. Ultimately, when you spend your money on yourself, you're going to be sure that you're getting the best price and that you're getting a good product. But what government does is they spend other people's money on other people. That's a recipe for not necessarily caring how much of a bargain you're getting and not caring how efficient that spending ends up being. So that's how you end up with things like I was just reading today. The Internal Revenue Service, when we did our big COVID stimmy binge, they sent over $1 billion in stimmy checks to inmates, to literal prisoners, including people convicted of rape and murder. You add that to the billions they sent to literal dead people, the millions they sent to random citizens of foreign countries who years ago once worked in the US. And the stimulus checks alone show you how disastrous it can be when you let other people spend other people's money on other people. And that's essentially what the government is always doing. So, I mean, it's just as much of that, mitigating it as possible. I think there are some taxes that are more harmful than others. I think the corporate tax is really a very difficult one because it hurts us internationally, competitively. It's very misleading to the public because they think that businesses pay it, but actually it's mostly borne by everyday people. I think other taxes that are really bad, the payroll tax, it's really hard to cut because it's tied up with, lots of our entitlement programs, but it's regressive tax literally applied on jobs. And when you tax something, you get less of it. So in general, the idea that we're taxing income, we're taxing payroll, those are things we should want more of, not less. To the extent that you're going to have taxes, I think you should be avoiding taxing things we actually want more of.
That actually is very good. Makes sense a lot, especially with the payroll. But what you said with payroll tax, with the more you tax, the less you have it. So it doesn't make sense in the long run. But yeah, go on, do that. I wanted to ask Marissa, I'm sorry that you lost, but you came second. So I do want to talk about your experience, a little bit about that, and what were especially the big roadblocks you've had when during your campaign, especially when you're trying to suggest like new policies, because with people with the, let's say, liberty minded, our policies are very easy and very easy to explain as well. But from a makers or like politicians' point of view, it's usually very much complicated to get rid of those things. So I was curious what you had experienced actually.
Sure. So the number one thing that I came across as a candidate was just getting the ability to be able to get in front of people and discuss these ideas, because you can have the best ideas in the world, but they don't matter unless people can hear them from you and be able to relate to them. So I made a little bit of controversy or the news by opening up an account as on OnlyFans and promoting political things there. And unfortunately, that's what we independent candidates have to do, is we have to find other ways, because the biggest roadblock to being an independent candidate is getting media coverage, is getting in front of people, is being able to raise the funds to be able to get in front of people. The second largest thing I encountered was organizations who give endorsements and therefore help candidates without picking through all of the available candidates. So without calling out any names, there are many organizations here in Miami-Dade County that refused to meet with all 4 candidates and only met with one and gave him the endorsement and gave him the, the help. And so I think that there's a lot of things that here in the United States, we talk about free and fair elections, but the reality is when you're out there and you're doing it, yes, it's pretty free and it's pretty fair. You can get on the ballot, you can do these things. But there are certain organizations that make sure that you don't get the equal vote, or that you don't get in front of people, or that you don't get the same access as other people. And so there's a lot of issues that I think that we can talk about. But at the end of the day, I was thrilled to be able to get in front of people, to be able to talk about the issues that mattered to me, to be able to push and provide people with information that they didn't know. Especially the budget of Miami-Dade County. Every time I tell people that it's $10.3 billion, you can see their eyes widen, and I didn't know that. Well, exactly. I think that running a candidacy and being vocal can bring people to freedom. I don't know that it's a game that independent candidates are necessarily well equipped to play. And I think that that's something that, especially in the liberty movement, we need to talk about, because we often talk about like Twitter and being on social media. And I think my candidacy proved that you can be in every major news station, especially the local ones, and still not win. And it takes more than just being a candidate that people know is out there. It takes a lot more. And we need to focus on our messaging, but the messaging is irrelevant if people aren't hearing that message.
Very correct. Brett, do you want to say anything about that?
Yeah, I think it was super cool what Martha did with the OnlyFans. You got so much media attention and coverage on that going outside the box. And as far as I'm concerned, power to you. That's the kind of outside of the box thinking you need to get noticed because everything is stacked against you, and you did get noticed. And I saw people even outside, way outside of my Liberty online sphere, sharing articles about this candidate who went viral, and I'm like, wow, look at you go. And then it's not like you did anything that racy, right? I mean, but even if you did, power to you.
Maybe, maybe, Brad.
Yeah.
No, I'm kidding.
I'm not your target audience for it, but power to you. I mean, I think this is just important that we do these outside of the box things. I mean, TikTok, right? Twitch. How many people in the liberty movement are actually active in these spaces? I am. A few people are, but mostly, they're not caught up with the times. And if you want to win the next generation, Gen Z, you kind of have to go where they are. Somebody asked me the other day, how can you be on TikTok? That's a Chinese Communist Party owned app. And I'm like, you're totally right. But the choice is either to cede it to the socialists, who are the biggest influencers on there, and just let them influence Gen Z, uncontested, or to go on this app that I don't really trust, that doesn't really respect my data privacy, and actually go where they are, right? Rather than say, well, I'll just stay over here on my island and wait for them to come to me. Like, no, you got to adapt. You've got to go think outside the box. You can't just do the same thing over and over again and expect a different outcome. So whether it's OnlyFans, whether it's TikTok, whether it's Twitch, whatever it is, I think we need to be forward looking in our pursuit in how we're going about our messaging.
Totally agree with that. And just for the record, I'm fully clothed on OnlyFans.
Still, power to you. I agree. Also, Brad's TikToks were my inspiration to go on TikTok, and then we also started Learn Liberty's TikTok because, okay, we can do something like that. So go follow Brad. Also, go follow Learn Liberty as well. We'll try to do something like that. That's very cool. I'm really glad. Also, I wanted to say that the OnlyFans thing is very cool. It's also very provocative, and I think it's very forward thinking. We need to, especially as a woman, you yourself is very aware of the space you're taking in politics as a woman. So you go on and turn it around them and make them aware of the space you're taking there. So that's very cool.
Yeah, I got a lot of flack for it. A lot of people were upset because it's OnlyFans, but I don't put any porn content on there. It's just a platform like any other, but it had that notoriety because people assume that you're gonna have. So I think it's not for everyone. And now that I've done it, I don't think it'll work necessarily in the future. Maybe it will. Who knows? We'll see where that goes. But I think the idea was to find a way to get your name out there without having to spend the millions of dollars to get your name out there. And that's the point that I hope I made clear, especially to the Liberty community, is you just can't keep doing things the way the other guy does because you'll never be able to compete. And in my race specifically, my opponent raised just under $2 million to my $100,000 raise. And for a libertarian, $100,000 is a lot of fundraising. Very few candidates managed to get that kind of money. And it was here in Miami, people looked at me, and political people looked at me and pretty much said, you're not doing enough. You haven't raised enough. You need to raise over $1 million. And even if I could have, I would not have done $1 million raise. It's just such a waste of money. And so, I don't want to discourage people, but definitely we need more people thinking in these kind of outlandish guerrilla marketing type of things, because that's what's going to push our movement forward.
Yeah, that's very cool.
Guerrilla marketing.
Like you said, as libertarians, we know the struggle to get to the money, get to the funds, and actually get to the people.
Yes. Also, because we're libertarians, we don't want to waste money. At least I don't. I mean, I want to be. How can we get up there on the dais or in whatever political position we ask for after we just raised $1 million and blew it? I mean, how can we say that we are conservative with your money when we can't even be conservative with our own? So I think there's also that. I didn't want to be a hypocrite.
Yeah, that's I appreciate it a lot. I'll take you two both towards the tax system back again. I know it's not the most interesting topic, but we'll make it as libertarians. So I'll go towards Brad and ask him, what do you think? I mean, US is the country that speaks about taxes the most, so people are the most aware of how much taxes they're paying, what's the importance of it and everything. I come from Turkey, I live in the Netherlands. People pay up to 50% of their income to taxes. They don't even know about that. But yeah, it sucks. It also feels weird because everybody loves paying their taxes. Just doesn't feel natural to me,
Who loves?
unfortunately. But in the US, every time I go to US, you pay for it. You buy I don't know, you buy lunch and then you pay for the service fee and then you pay for the surcharge fee. On top of that, you pay the taxes. So it makes me very angry every time I go to the US, which I assume most Americans also realize that they are angry towards taxes, but still, US tax system is not great. And then you have these big problems. What do you think is the reason? Because it seems like you actually put some incentives for people to realize what's wrong with it, but what are we
I
supposed
think
to do?
I think part of the problem, there's two big problems maybe that go to this question. One is that the tax system is it's not as in your face as I think I'd like it to be. If I had it my way, and this isn't fully practical for a couple of reasons, but on November 2nd, right, you would go and write a whole check for your taxes for the year, and then you go to the voting booth the next day, or whatever. If it's a special election, put it a day before the election, you have to pay your whole taxes in full. But because of tax withholding, where it's just taken out of your paycheck every week or every other week, a lot of the taxation is almost out of sight, out of mind for people. And I think that's very problematic because then they don't realize how much it actually is. And then, they do see it on their sales tax or those, but the biggest taxes, the income and payroll taxes, is just taken out without them even thinking about it. And that's maybe helpful practically, but I think it's actually counterproductive in terms of being aware in terms of being aware about this. But the other problem is that our tax code is deeply distorted, full of loopholes. I think the best tax code is as simple as possible, right? You would have as few carve outs and special loopholes and exceptions because those are just different ways that people rig the system in their favor. But the problem there is this issue of dispersed costs and then concentrated benefits. So like when they have a special tax loophole, there's a big interest in lobbyists that will come and reward a politician that passes it. But the costs are dispersed across 330 million people, and most people barely notice. So even policies that are a net negative for our tax system, for our economy, they can become law and stay law because there's a small interest group that gets the concentrated benefits, yet the losers are the big society at large. So I wish people would just pay more attention to these things, care about these things more. I know, the tax code, I forget exactly what it is, but if you stacked it up, how many stories tall it would be. And that complexity is itself a form of tax because the accountants of the millionaires and billionaires can, comb through with their army of lawyers and assistants and find every last loophole. But average Americans don't have time for that. They have jobs, they have families. So the more complicated our taxes are, the more loopholes and subsidies and sketchy things that there are carve out into our tax code, the more it advantages the elite and the more it disadvantages everyday people.
Preach.
If I
I
may,
agree. Go ahead.
if I may add to Brad's point, Intuit, the company that runs TurboTax, is one of the largest lobbyists to maintain the tax code as it is. So again, going back to my point on government just doesn't really care about us, we the people, that would be a great way to solve the tax problem. It would also lead to what Brad was describing, where people actually have to pay their taxes. And, if it was clear, if we didn't have these lobbies of these companies that make money off of us having to file our taxes. So I agree 100% with what Brad's saying. And I'm thinking that we really need to work on making sure that people actually have to physically pay their taxes rather than it coming out of your paycheck if we really want to make changes in this country.
Just really makes sense. Also, the first suggestion Brad had is very cruel, but it's the first time I'm hearing it. Sounds very good, actually, because every time I have to pay my taxes here, it's just something just runs down my neck. It's like, yeah, so
Especially
that was
because
really
it's not like the money's going to a good place, right? It's like so much of it's it's going to be wasted, or worse than wasted. It's going to be used to like line the pockets of some military contractor doing goodness knows what somewhere. So it's like they always say like, oh, you hate paying taxes, you don't like having other people have schools and healthcare, and I'm like, first off, we could debate that, but that's like not most of what this is going to.
not
It
at
is.
all.
It doesn't go to what people think, and that's the first thing I hear too, is schools or your roads. Don't you like traveling on safe roads? And it's like, if that's where my taxes were going, I would love that. Unfortunately, our taxes are going to lots of other things, not the things that people think about. So if we could have like a GoFundMe for the government, people would be more than willing to fund the things that I think we all find important, like schools, and Brad, we could definitely debate that whole concept, but not only schools, but the roads, or helping other people. If we could direct our money to where we wanted it to go, it wouldn't be so painful. It's the fact that we can't. It's the fact that the government just makes up these choices for us, and they say, we're going to fund these wars, or we're going to fund these companies. And I don't think that most Americans support that.
Yeah. I don't know if I'm remembered correctly, but Anthony Davies is a professor from University of Duquesne, I think. He said that 40% of your taxes are just going to the system that is trying to allocate where the taxes are supposed to go. So that 40 cents of every dollar is just for someone to sit there and say that maybe this. It's just ridiculous. It just makes me very angry.
It's probably more. I've read some statistics that it takes $1 to spend $1, so it's probably even higher, because it's like a system. You have to pay the computers and the people to sit in front of the computers to make these. It's expensive to waste your money.
Yeah, very much so. But before Brad came up with this amazing solution of like you have to pay all of your taxes before the one day before the elections,
I didn't invent that, to be clear.
You're fine.
I don't
You
know
made
where
it
I heard
popular
it,
right
but
now. That's fair enough. That's fair enough. I was
Take
gonna
it, Brad. It's
ask you,
yours.
just own it. I was just gonna ask you about the flat tax rate, because in Europe, a couple of countries are starting doing that. So they have 50% tax and no other questions asked. So like you tell them you make this much money and then 50% of it's taken, and that's it. There's no more filling out forms, no more trying to claim whatever else. What do you think about it? I'm curious about both of your opinions separately.
Well, I think it's better in the sense that like you shouldn't have to have an army of accountants or pay somebody. Think of all the billions of dollars that are spent just paying accountants, right? It's kind of a waste. The idea, even under a flat tax, right? If you have 10% for everybody or 15% for everybody, rich people still pay more because 15% of a million is more than 15% of 50,000. So people are like, oh, well, why should I have to pay as much in taxes as a billionaire? And it's like, well, it would actually be a lot more money still. I guess I'm only on a relative basis. But I think that we're so far from there that the best we could hope for is simply reducing rates and then closing loopholes, because like we have a progressive tax system, especially federally. And to go to a flat tax, I think is a great idea, but I just think it's pretty far from where we are. But as simple as possible, Republicans have never really actually acted on it or done it, but they used to talk about you should be able to do your taxes on a postcard. And that is a really good idea because, like I said, complexity is a subsidy. It's a form of reverse taxation, right? Like the more complicated it is, the more loopholes there are, the better that benefits the giant corporations and the super wealthy, and the worse that benefits an average person who doesn't have the wherewithal or the resources to navigate all this stuff and doesn't have an army of lobbyists on speed dial. So the fewer, and for every exemption, some people will say, but I really need this one. And it's like, okay, well, you got to get rid of all of them, because if you just try to get rid of some of them, then you would end up with debating, well, charity is good though. And it's like, yes, there lots of these are good things, but if we just get rid of all of it, then it's a level playing field, and that's what I think we should strive for.
I'll agree with you on that one. I think that for the flat tax, we should absolutely strive to go for it, even though the number you gave out, 50%, scares me. I would rather take a 50% flat tax than what we have now, just because of the amount of savings that we'd have. Like Brad mentioned, with accountants and lawyers, and even for somebody that isn't a millionaire or billionaire, I can't do my taxes alone. So there's a lot of cost for the average business, the average person. So definitely taking a flat tax, even if it was 50%, I would take that, because then we can fight to reduce the flat tax amount. So I love the idea of a flat tax. I agree with Brad. We are far from it, mostly because most Americans, when you start talking about taxes and a flat tax, they'll tell you, but so-and-so needs to pay more, and Jeff Bezos didn't pay enough, and, and so on and so forth. But meanwhile, I recently saw something of one of these influencers out on the street with a microphone, and they asked people, hey, how do you feel about giving more money to X group? People are like, yes. And they're like, how much are you personally going to contribute? How much more are you willing to pay from your taxes to cover that? And people are like, no, not at all. So I think that is brilliant, to start bringing it towards people and making them realize that those policies that they're asking for, somebody's got to pay for those things. They don't just magically appear. We don't magically have the money. Well, I mean, we kind of do, but that's a whole other topic.
I also wanted to pick up on Martha about property taxes. I know you have some issues with that. Can you tell us a bit about that?
Oh man, you're getting me on these subjects that I just passionate about. I love property tax. Well, no, I don't love property taxes. I'm passionate about property taxes. So one of the great tragedies, and I don't know if it's everywhere in the United States, but definitely here in Miami-Dade County, is that we charge every single year people to be able to rent their property. And this doesn't matter if you're actually renting from somebody else or if you are the owner of your property. If you own your property, we charge you an annual fee, and you don't really have much of a say on that. They did cap it in Miami-Dade. It's 3%. It can grow year over year. And then you are forced to pay this. So one of the great tragedies happening here in Miami-Dade County that nobody is talking about is the amount of people who lose their homes. Even 100% paid off homes are lost. And these are generally people who are the elderly or who have some type of disability, mental health, whatever the issue may be, that they paid off their mortgage and they think that they're set for life. And then comes this realization that they can no longer afford their house and they're kicked out. And it doesn't happen in a long period of time. It's not a 10-year process. It's a 2-year process. You don't pay your property taxes 1 year, and those property taxes get sent to an auction. Somebody buys it. And then by the next year, they can already foreclose on your home. Maximum of 3 years, and you would be out of your house. So think about it. If you have a medical condition and for this year you can't pay for it, and it lags over a year, you're going to lose your home. And it is a travesty that in this country, we are taking people's properties away from them and selling it to the highest bidder and leaving them on the street. This is the American dream. It's your property. Why do we have to pay the government to be able to keep your property that you paid for, that you built on, that that you've done? And it's just, I don't know how else to say it other than it's just disgusting. It really is.
I really didn't know about that. But Brad, what do you think?
I did it. Yeah, the very idea of the property tax is kind of offensive in that it's like, is it really your property if you have to pay to not have it confiscated from you? It also, I mean, property taxes are usually used to fund schools, which then has created a very messed up government school system that perpetuates inequality because the rich neighborhoods have more money for their schools and the poor schools don't have as much money. So I just think property taxes overall are a very fraught area. But yeah, I mean, it's like any of the taxes. Ultimately, what it's levied on is people having property is good. Actually, like people buying their home, that's a good thing. I don't know why we want to discourage that so much. I think to the extent that we need to raise money through taxes, sin taxes, like taxes on cigarettes or taxes on luxuries or on the lottery, I think are a lesser of the evils, in my opinion.
That's correct. I also wanted to pick your mind a little bit about, you had a piece about the rent control experiment in St. Paul. Do you want to tell us a bit about that, Brad?
Yeah, so rent control doesn't work out great. Rent control, for folks that don't know, is basically when they pass a law that says rent can only go up by 2% a month, 3% a month. And in St. Paul, it absolutely failed. It always backfires, it leads to higher prices, it leads to lower supply. Some famous economist, I can't remember who, said like the first fastest way to destroy a city is bombing. The next is rent control. And so for folks that aren't familiar with it, they might not be aware that it's something that's happening in cities across the country, but it is, and it is basically a form of government intervention that totally destroys your housing markets. And it's supposed to help people and lower rent, but it really does the opposite by limiting supply and leading to higher prices over time. So rent control, not great, folks. Don't do it.
It is not great, and it is illegal in the state of Florida. Just another reason why people who want freedom should move to Florida, even though we'll still steal your house and take it away from you if you don't pay your property taxes.
Well, a good reminder for people to go to Florida that we're going to have our International LibertyCon in October 14 and 15. So again, don't forget the code 50% off. We don't like to pay too much for anything. So 50% off is quite a bit. So please do take advantage of that, and please join us at Miami LibertyCon at October 14 and 15. And you can get to meet Martha also and get to hear about her passionate ideas about taxes, property, especially for property taxes, in person. Also, I really like reading your piece about the rent control, Brad, because I'm 28 now. I feel like I will never be able to buy a house, so I'll be renting for the rest of my life. So if that's happening, I'd like to at least have my own control over that. I don't want to live in a country in a city that has that fails completely. And this millennial housing crisis is actually hitting us harder than we thought. Martin, what do you think about that? Do you think you have that kind of a millennial crisis that's happening around Miami, or is it mostly a big city problem?
Well, we are a big city. We are a huge city, and we absolutely have this problem. And I actually have children that are millennials. So my oldest is 21, and he, I think he feels the same way you do, which is how can I ever actually pay? When will I ever be able to own my own property? And I think that this just goes to show that this is why we need to get government out of the problem. Buying a piece of land probably wouldn't be that difficult. Building your own house probably wouldn't be that difficult. But here we are. Government requires so much in order to be able to have something. And it's almost like they want it perfect, right? So we have these building codes and you have to follow it. Otherwise, you can't live there. They won't give you a certificate of occupancy. So there's a lot of things that government does that just kind of keeps our youth, especially, feeling like they won't be able to afford to live in this county. Miami-Dade has a huge growth in population. We are the place that, we've traditionally had immigration from South America and Central America come to Miami, especially Cuba. We have the largest Cuban diaspora in the world. But right now, I like to joke around and say we're actually bringing in immigrants from New York and California. So we have a huge population growth. And the reality is we can't keep up with the housing. So housing just gets more and more and more expensive. And then you look at what the government is doing to provide free or cheaper housing, and it only helps the developers. It only really helps the government themselves, or the people that fund those people in government. And so we're never going to solve the problem by continuously thinking that government has the solutions. We should probably get government out of the way and allow for the free market to offer solutions. And we've seen this around the country in modular tiny homes or container homes. There are so many new building materials and building ways that would lower the cost of, having your own home. But government doesn't want to hear those things. And I think that's the real tragedy, is that we're not bringing in that innovation. We're not allowing these companies or these, ideas to flourish.
Yep, very true. What do you think? So I'll pick your brains a little bit as like sort of like closing remarks a little bit. So what do you think are the three things that we can resolve quickest in the US, but we just don't? Could be about taxes, could be about anything, free market, open borders, anything.
I think that well, this is on everybody's mind right now. The easiest thing we could do to stop college from being so insanely expensive is just end the federal subsidies, the federal student loan programs that have given schools a blank check to raise up tuition prices. I think that could stop tomorrow. Uh, and honestly, we'd be better off for it. I think another thing is we could just turn off the money printing machine at the Fed. Right? Congress could pass a law saying, please stop, go home, and then the inflation would check itself within a few months or whatever it would take for it to work out of the system. So it's just like a lot of these things, the solutions aren't actually super complicated. It's just that they're a big political lift or would require a lot of people to accept that they can't have everything that they ever dreamed of for free.
That is correct.
You have two more, Brad? She wanted 3 items,
Keep it coming.
I gave two. A third one. What could we do easily? I don't know. You go.
I'm stumped. I am stumped because I don't think that there's anything that we could do easily. I think everything is kind of education would probably be where I would go with this, and it has nothing to do with our taxes, or a little bit, but education, because all of these problems that we have stem from the lack of education, or the reason that people believe that we need these taxes is to fund this education that then they're just not getting a good one. So by fixing our education system, we would first create more people that are actually educated, and then we wouldn't have necessarily this tax issue. Education, you can get an education anywhere. I've probably learned more off of YouTube than I ever did throughout my entire years going to regular school, high school, college. I have a bachelor's degree, and I feel like I go to YouTube to learn so many things or open up a book. Why do we insist on everyone going and getting a college degree as if that was like the be all end all? I know plenty of people who've gone to college, and unfortunately it seems that they went to college, but college kind of didn't sink in. And we have some elected representatives where I think that's the case. So I just think that we need to focus on education. That would be my first quick solve, although I don't think. And then for the other ones, I have no idea. Nothing is easy. I mean, I thought running for office would at least be somewhat easy. That wasn't. So you have to get power in order to make these changes. And I know that a lot of people on this own feed are more anarchist leaning and thinking, you know what, just don't participate. And that's where then comes back. We have to step in. We have to start educating. Nothing is going to change until we have people that actually care about the situation and what's going on. And I don't know how you solve that. More TikTok.
Power to Brad this time.
Yeah, no, I agree with Martha about that people have to care, people have to step up, they have to get involved. It's very easy to just be defeatist and say, oh, they're politics, they're just going to waste our money, they're just going to ruin everything. Yes, but it doesn't have to be as bad as it would otherwise be if we do get involved. So I completely agree with that.
And how do we make that happen?
I mean, as libertarians, or even generally liberals, because I live in Europe, it's been very hard for us to actually raise our voice and be heard. So power to you for actually trying to do that. I'll get 2 last opinions from you, and that's about your hottest take as a libertarian. Mine is that I think European Union is against open borders policy. So that's my hot take. That will always make people go against me. That'll corner me in every bar. So that's what goes. What is your hottest take as a libertarian?
Like our least libertarian opinion? Is that what you're asking for?
Yeah.
Yeah, okay. So mine is I believe in anti-discrimination law protections for gay and transgender Americans. I think, there's a whole debate over the Civil Rights Act, but it's not going anywhere. And anti-discrimination law is part of how the government keeps markets open and free to everybody. And I've also always believed that, we have religious people protected under civil rights law. So gay and transgender people should be too. Otherwise, that's an inequality in the law, which I don't believe in. So I don't see why you should be able to fire somebody for being gay or being transgender, which is not a choice. But you can not fire somebody for their religion, which is a choice. So I think if we're going to have these anti-discrimination laws, I've advocated for them to be expanded in a way that respects religious freedom, not applying this to like religious schools or to, nuns or these kinds of things. But yeah, I mean, I support anti-discrimination laws, and that's never been a fully libertarian position. So cancel me.
It really is. It's a hard position. So
It is.
props
So my
to you,
hot
Sue.
take, which should not be anti-libertarian, but I'm going to put it out there, and I think a lot of libertarians are going to disagree with me, and that is immigration. So I believe that you can't have actual freedom unless you are free to move, complete freedom to move, and that includes allowing people to come into this country. Now, I'm not, obviously as a libertarian, I don't believe in the welfare state. I don't believe that we should be providing anything to anyone, really, and especially not people that come to this country seeking a better opportunity for themselves. But I see a lot of people not agreeing with that because we have these government programs and handouts and whatnot. But I absolutely think that freedom of movement is absolutely a libertarian ideal. And I know that that's a big controversy within the party. Nobody wants to openly say that they are for open borders. I absolutely am. And the economic side of this, and I hope, Brad, you might be able to back me up on it, is that when immigrants come to a place, one location, actually we see the opposite of what people argue, which is that there is more economic opportunity. And I believe that my city, Miami, is one of these particular case studies that we could look at. 50, 60 years ago, we had very little in terms of immigration of any kind. And over time, we now see this huge metropolitan city. And that is because the people that also need things, they also provide things, and it provides a market for everyone else. So I think that's my big hot take.
It should not be, but yeah, it is. It's very much of a hot take these days. We're hearing, we're reading all about it. So thank you very much for actually being on a very libertarian side, I would say. These are all of my questions. Thank you very much for joining. Do you wanna add on anything else? Do you want to pitch in your organization, your podcast, your whatever you
check
do?
out FEE, the Foundation for Economic Education, FEE.org, and also Based Politics, my podcast. Search it wherever you listen to podcasts.
I'm going to echo Brad's. It's a great podcast. Everyone should check it out. Based. It also features Hannah Cox, who's wonderful and amazing, as are you, Brad. And then remind everyone that we have LibertyCon coming up in October. I'll be the MC. I need people there to cheer us all on. So please show up, please come, buy your tickets. And that's about it. I'm no longer running for office.
Thank you. Also, unfortunately, we won't have Brad, but you can see Hannah and ask your hot take questions to her. Maybe she would need to Brad. Yeah. That is all from us. Thank you very much, and hope to see you soon. And thank you very much for joining our live Learn Liberty session. We'll be having at least one more of these before LibertyCon, and I can not tell you who's it going to be, but it's going to be very, very good. So stay tuned.